Hey, Service Autopilot Pros, Scott here. I'm here today talking with Andrew Etmus and Scott Howard, trainers with Service Autopilot, and we're talking about the virtual regional training coming up July 16th and 17th. So let's dive right in. All right, let's start with some introductions. I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. Everybody out here already knows who you guys are, but for anyone that doesn't, we'll go that way. So Andrew, you're the first person on my screen. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Etmus. I've been with Service Autopilot for, 7 years now. Started out in support, and then about 4 years ago, I moved over to the training team, which has been great. I love helping our members learn the software and use it to just streamline their businesses. In my free time, I have 2 young kids. That takes up all of my free time. So yeah, that's me.
Scott, tell us about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Scott Howard. I've been at Service Autopilot for 15 years. Been in training. I've wore just about every hat at Service Autopilot, but been in training now probably about 12 years of that 15 years. So probably trained over 1,000 different managers and or owners over the years. My favorite thing to do is actually live training. So regional is one of my favorite things, mainly because like Andrew, I love helping people. I love actually watching them just absorb the knowledge and then be able to practically apply that knowledge, to their own businesses. So that's my favorite things to do. I've also done about, I think 9 on-site visits this year already because it's live. I just enjoy, being around our members and just getting to know them. As far as what I do, like hobbies and that kind of thing, I have 3 grandkids, which are a whole lot better than kids, by the way. And so I spend a lot of time with them. I also love hunting and fishing, camping, hiking. Right now, I'm getting ready to launch an Amazon store. That's a new little business venture that I'm doing. I've also done lawn care, landscaping, actually commercial cleaning in my past life as business kind of ventures as well. So yeah, I'm just kind of a master. What was that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. That's what it is. Yeah.
I am going to ask another thing here related to just the training scope in general and that experience. What's your favorite part about training Service Autopilot members? I know, Scott, you talked a little bit about it a little bit, but Andrew, what's your favorite part about training Service Autopilot members?
Sometimes, or really what it is seeing that aha moment where like it clicks for them. Like, okay, cool, this is how I schedule a job. But like they see all the pieces go together and they realize, no, this is actually going to be a game changer. This is going to really help us grow.
Yeah. I think I would agree. As someone in my personal life, I've been a teacher's assistant for many years, and I love seeing like the students come in and then when they like learn a topic, when you do see that aha moment, it is very satisfying. It is why we do what we do if we like teaching and educating and training people. So Scott, what about you? What is your favorite part about training Service Autopilot members?
Yeah, the same thing basically is I really love that. It's very gratifying. Kind of my topic, I think my favorite topic is, 2 things really. I have 2 favorite topics. I love teaching marketing strategy. I use actually smart maps, which we'll get into more about that a little bit later. And then that aha moment with that, like a lot of times they don't realize you can do certain things in Service Autopilot, which is kind of cool. There's a lot of cool things you can do with smart maps. But then the other topic that I love that aha moment about is it was job costing, because most people have no clue what their numbers really are. And so to be able to see that come to fruition and be able to see their reaction when they look at like a job cost analysis report, and then they can actually see what kind of money they're making and what kind of money they're losing and where maybe they need to do price increases and that kind of thing. So that's also, a really cool thing to watch and be able to see their reactions to those kind of things as they learn how to apply them.
I'm going to say this probably leads into the next one. What's one thing that you wish every Service Autopilot member knew about how powerful this software really is?
Yeah, it's really just the ability, like you have all of this data at your disposal when everything is set up correctly. You've got your times on jobs and things like that. And then you're able, the value of doing all of that work ahead of time is that you get that you can run reports on it and you can really see overall, how is our business doing? Like some people will say, like, I did $1 million in revenue last year. That's great. But if you had $1.5 million in expenses, you're not doing well. And so like getting that big picture, that's really kind of the big thing. And that goes into like the strategy. Like once you have everything set up, now we're moving on to like a different level of training.
Yeah. So maybe it's the members come in with like this idea that they're focused on like a very particular thing that they want to do, but being able to see, like, to realize the full picture, and hopefully they take that away. And that's probably a very satisfying feeling too, is once they have that power.
I would concur with that. But in addition to that, once they do have all of that set up, and also things like their documents and how they present their how they present their business to their customers. That's really cool to watch their reaction and be able to see, I guess, just the satisfaction because a lot of people don't like how they present estimates, for instance, or even emails to their customers. And then the next step, once they've got that in place, is to automate that. So the automation side of it, that's kind of the next level as well. Because you can have those documents already pre-written if you want to, and have them fancy and nice, and pictures in there, your logo, and all this stuff. And then they can just set up an automation, and it goes out automatically. You don't have to worry about anything else. It's kind of the set it and forget it mentality once you have that automation going, and you can be proud of what you're sending out there to your clients. So that's really nice.
So let's talk about the why behind the virtual training to give kind of a broader perspective of what we're looking at doing with this new type of training format. So for someone who's never been to a virtual training before, how would you describe what this event actually is?
Yeah. So as much as we can, we try to replicate what a live regional training is like over Zoom, which is that it's a big task, right? Like we normally will have like 20 people in a conference room at our headquarters in Atlanta, and then trying to replicate that over a Zoom meeting can be difficult, but we really do our best. So we have our training manager Brandy come in, and she really brings in the hype to kind of start us off, which really sets the tone. She's really good at getting people engaged, and we try to get people to use the chat or even like unmute themselves and say like, "Hey, I have a question," just like you would if we were in person. Like you maybe raise your hand and be like, "Hey, how did you do that? How did you get there?" That is incredibly helpful. But really, it's just we're going to go through a lot of topics. We go kind of fast because we have a lot of material to cover, but we go over as much of the system as we can. And we leave time for questions, of course. And we also have some group activities as well, which I know we'll talk about later. But we really, like I said, it's really just trying to replicate that live scenario as much as we can over Zoom.
Yeah. And then I guess the question that leads into that would be, why should a Service Autopilot member, whether they're brand new or a longtime member, make time for this type of training?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say two things. Number one, focus. Having a dedicated time that you're going to spend, whether it's virtual or in person, either one, it just makes it easier to retain because you're actually dedicating this time and you're focusing. Hopefully you are anyway. And hopefully you're not reading your emails while we're going over stuff. But basically, that focus time, that dedicated time just helps you retain things a whole lot more and a whole lot better. The other side of it is we will actually have some one-on-one time. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But that can actually be helpful too, because let's say you are a longtime member and maybe you've been using the system, but you've only been using maybe 15% of the system. Therefore, 85% of the system isn't being used and you're going through the class, but then there's a few things where maybe you're just having a hard time kind of connecting the dots with a few things, just how things work together and stuff like that. Well, you can ask those clarifying questions, specifically for your company in some of this one-on-one kind of training that's going to be training your way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we'll segment out some time where you can actually do that. But that one-on-one time is also applicable to even a new member too, because, maybe you just missed something or you don't quite get a concept or whatever. And that's also a really good time to be able to share that kind of thing and get clarification on that kind of gaps, if you will, maybe in your knowledge. So
Awesome. Yeah. And so to me, it sounds like they'll kind of have like two opportunities to kind of learn things. You'll have your different topics that you go through, which will probably be good for both new and existing members. And then you'll also have time. It sounds like, I think we get to it later, is like a breakout session or something where they can ask more personalized questions, which is probably where it would help, where if you're a new member, you can ask some of the things that might have been a little like abstract to you. Or if you're an existing member, you can be like, yeah, I know that, but like, let's dive into this particular thing about it. So, I mean, that sounds really cool to me. What makes the virtual regional training different from like just watching a tutorial video, reading a help doc, anything like that?
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. So one of them is just your interaction with us. Like you get to ask us your questions. So if there's something specific you want to know, hey, can say forms do this? Then we can just answer that question. You don't have to go wait and watch a whole video necessarily. That's one part. But the other part is also other people's interaction with us, because someone else might ask the question that you didn't think to ask, and it actually, trigger some ideas for you. Or you might think, yeah, that's a good question. I didn't think about that. That's worth asking. So you get the collaboration with us, the back and forth dialogue on whatever the topic is.
Which is great, because that is one of the things that when you're dealing with a group setting, you can learn through somebody else's experiences, something that you might not have thought about before, or the different peers, especially if you're working in different states but same industry. You get different perspectives from things that you might not have thought about before. So I definitely, that is an awesome part about all these trainings, both virtual and in person. So who is this training really built for then? What kind of business owner or employee are we talking about who would get the most out of this type of training?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a couple of definitely new people, definitely new to Service Autopilot, because we are going to be covering pretty much end to end, just about everything. We cover both basic topics and we also cover advanced topics. So you're going to see pretty much a very broad view of all of Service Autopilot. And so for a new person that doesn't have a whole lot of exposure, that's going to be really, really good for them. In addition to anybody else who maybe been using Service Autopilot for a little while, if you have any new employees that just don't know Service Autopilot very well, same thing. It's just a different scenario. Basically, it's an existing customer that's been with us for a while, but they just have new employees. And it's almost like a brand new business with Service Autopilot, but it's just a new employee scenario. The other side of it is what I mentioned earlier is maybe you've been with us for a long time and you just haven't implemented very much of Service Autopilot because of the broad view and what Andrew said, being able to interact and ask questions and say, hey, how can this apply to my company? I don't understand how this concept really applies here. You can start being able to implement more of Service Autopilot a lot easier by going through this kind of a training.
It's awesome. Okay. So we've got 2 full days packed of different trainings that we're going to be going through. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. Let's start with day 1. I know it's easy for field service businesses to lose track of like their client conversations between the office, the field, email threads, however else they want to do that. How does the CRM tool session change that?
Yeah. So this basically is a way of organizing all of the communication about a specific topic. So we do that through something in Service Autopilot called tickets, where you will have a ticket is basically a non-billable task, right? Like maybe someone needs to follow up on an invoice or something. And any internal notes, any records of phone calls with the client, any emails, all of that gets logged within the umbrella of that ticket. And it makes it just really easy to say, where are we at with this? Without having to look through not only just all of the emails for that particular customer, but maybe you were tracking those things in a different system. Maybe, the phone calls were in a different system and it's all just all over the place. You have it in one spot and here's all of our information for this specific thing. And then it also just helps with that. This section of the training also helps with streamlining how do we communicate with our customers. So we'll talk about tagging customers, emails, or sending emails in bulk and things like that, streamlining that whole process.
Okay. So like best practices on trying to optimize the members' different procedures that they might do on a daily basis. They probably don't think twice about, they just think it's normal. What's something that attendees usually don't realize about tickets, calls, events, emails, and notes could do for them?
So a lot of people don't know about the note section. Like on a specific client's account, there's actually what we call a quick note. When you put something in there, it actually becomes a ticket. It's just a ticket that's started out as a note. And so that's actually a kind of a quick feature. A lot of people might be talking to a customer over the phone and they find out something new about that customer. Well, in this scenario, they would just basically go to that account. They would go down to the little activity stream, type in a real quick note, hit enter, and they're done. And it saves it. And it's right there in their timeline then. And it's all going to be in chronological order. So if you ever wanted to go back and look at that note again, it's just right there at your fingertips. So it makes it really easy to make those little quick notes. That's one thing. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize with tickets is with calendar events, which is a ticket, it's just a different classification of a ticket. A calendar event shows up in about 5 different places. If you assign that calendar event to another Service Autopilot user, they'll be able to see that on their My Day page, the dispatch board, a calendar, as well as the actual main ticket screen, and also on the mobile app. So you can see that calendar event in all of those different places. So that way you don't lose track of what you're supposed to be doing. A calendar event is very much like a to-do. In other words, I need to go do something. I need to or it's assigned to me to do something. Maybe I need to follow up, or maybe I need to go visit with a property, visit a member, visit a client at a property. So those are the kind of things that a lot of people don't realize that you can actually do and be able to see and keep track of with tickets.
Awesome. Yeah. And when we talk about texting to improve communication with both clients and employees, how does that work?
Yeah. So we're talking about like adding two-way texting, for example. So very often I get the question on training. It's like, this is cool that I can email this or whatever, but people don't check their emails anymore. How can I text this information to them? And it just, people are more likely to read a text, especially in the moment. Like if it's hey, we're on the way to your property or we're going to be at your property tomorrow. If I see a text for that, I'm going to be more likely to look at it. That's the client side. With the two-way texting feature, that also gives you the opportunity to text your employees from the system. So if you added a job to their route or something like that, you can send them a quick text and say, hey, just a reminder to maybe refresh the app or something. We added this particular job at this job site or whatever the case may be. But it's all in Service Autopilot. It's not outside of it. So other people can see it. It's all in one spot. It just makes it really streamlined.
As a consumer dealing with it, it takes so much of the concern or pressure or the anxiety of knowing, like, are they showing up today? What are they doing? The connection between the consumer, myself, and the member is so much smoother. It's awesome. Okay, let's move into the next session, which I saw is forms. Most owners are still chasing down information from clients and crews using some combination of texts, phone calls, paper. How will the form session help them?
So forms, number one, some people confuse forms with documents. A document is a way to share information. A form is a way to gather information. And so kind of like what Andrew was just talking about, when you gather information via a form, it becomes a part of the system. It'll go into the activity stream or the timeline of the individual client. If it's a client that's filling it out, it'll go into the form's responses if it's an employee filling it out. So you have the ability to send out forms to both clients and also have forms even pop up automatically on the mobile app for your employees. And so you can gather information from both avenues there. And it all goes back into Service Autopilot in specific places where you can keep track of all of that information and then maybe strategically even use that information later on, whether it be maybe updating a custom field because you can map certain fields within a form to other fields that are already existing in Service Autopilot, which is really cool because when they fill out, say, a brand new field and that's mapped to, say, a custom field, it might be a square footage of something, or it might be the fact that they have a dog or they don't have a dog, if it's in a residential scenario. Those kind of things make it really nice when you're gathering that information so that you can plan better. You can know better how to take care of your client. You can know better how to maybe even price services for them. And just communication just makes everything better whenever you're able to have accurate information, either straight from a client or maybe even straight from your employees, depending on which avenue you go with those forms.
And I'm going to do a follow-up thing here just because I also just did a content piece on custom fields, and seeing what that was capable of doing was incredibly powerful, especially the things like, and we kind of touched on it, like the gate code thing, if they have that, like pets or something, or a particular place or a unit they need to work on. That kind of stuff was really cool. Do you guys connect those types of things like with custom fields and like how they can use that at some point during the training?
Yes. Custom fields are so much more powerful than people realize. You can actually put custom fields on the mobile app as like a property node. You can use custom fields in what's called a rate matrix. And some of you may or may not have heard that before, but that terminology helps you get automatic pricing, automatic time, and automatic labor cost for jobs on estimates, primarily for estimates. You can also use some of that data on a job as well. But it's so powerful in the sense that you can get that automatic information in other areas of the system, whether it's on a mobile app or whether it's in an estimate or a job. That custom field data feeds into and gives you all of this extra data that is just automatic. It just happens. So yeah, it's really cool how it works.
Yeah. Okay. So I see you guys have a group activity listed for a virtual training. So how exactly does that work for attendees, especially in like this virtual setting? Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So we really make it like a game. So we use a platform called Kahoot, and we basically are going to make like a quiz where we're going to check your knowledge of Service Autopilot. You're not going to get graded or anything like that. It's just a little fun kind of competitive thing. We'll throw in some fun questions in there too. But the real point of this is really just so we can get a gauge of where people are at. And we can then kind of tailor, like, okay, maybe this area of the system's a little bit of a hiccup. We might spend a little more time on that. And also, I said it was competitive. So the winner of the game will receive a free half day virtual one-on-one training with either Scott or myself. So it's not just a game to fill time, like you actually win something. So if you don't play, you don't win, is what I'll say about that.
I mean, a half day training is a pretty nice giveaway. So that amount of time with any trainer to be able to ask whatever you want is a very, very nice prize. You should have led with that. Why is collaborating with other attendees such a valuable part of that experience then?
So that'll be being able to share those answers and someone else hear that answer. And maybe that's something they haven't actually thought of before. That just adds new ideas, to everyone who's actually participating in that. So kind of like asking questions, but this is more of a gamified kind of a way of asking and answering questions. But it just honestly just gives new ideas and new ways of thinking about concepts and how Service Autopilot all works together. But even more than that, just how you can bring new ideas and new concepts with maybe processes and procedures into your business and more efficiencies and more productivity, into your business because you're collaborating and you're learning how other people are doing things. And you can take those ideas and possibly then apply those to your own company.
So we talked about this at the beginning. You had mentioned Smart Map, low barrier of entry, but probably does way more than people would expect. So like, what's the aha moment that you're looking for that people should be taking away during the session on Smart Map?
So there's 4 different things that Smart Maps can do. The aha moment would be the first aha moment. There's more than one. Would be the fact that you can actually go to a part of your service area on a map. And this is all from the CRM client or CRM lead screen. You can go to the map. You can see all your clients on there. And let's just say that you want to bring some new leads into Service Autopilot. You can zoom in on a particular area. We call that your ideal client area. And we can talk more about that later. But there's strategic things all around everything that I'm getting ready to explain. You basically go to that area, which would be a great place for you to do some marketing. You bring in, let's just say 500 new leads if you wanted to. I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number, but you could bring all those into Service Autopilot and then you could have some content already created in Service Autopilot, or you could export those into an Excel spreadsheet, give them to your printer and say, hey, here's a bunch of contacts. We want to go ahead and send out direct mail to these people, because you've already got their addresses. And so there's a lot of strategic things that you could do with that. The other part after you've brought all those people in and you've possibly marketed to them, you could also pick any one of those or more than one, and you could go and do property measurements. And once you have those property measurements, they can be saved into custom fields. And we already talked about rate matrices. That custom field then would populate the rate matrix. You do an estimate for it. You've never even met these people before, and you've already got a full blown estimate, and you're ready to give them an estimate now. And so all of this, it's a very strategy oriented way of thinking about Service Autopilot, all the way from bringing in new leads to marketing to those new leads to actually creating an estimate and possibly even closing a sale, for someone you've never even talked to before. You just saw them on a map and happen to go through this process to maybe winning a bid, from just that very starting process there that we talked about. The other things that are really cool about it, and when you're measuring a property, I don't know, a lot of people don't realize you can do all this stuff, but when you're measuring a property, you go into satellite view. Well, in most places now, sometimes Google restricts us on this, but in most places in the country, you have the little guy in the bottom right hand corner. He's your little street view guy, and you can click and drag him over to any street you want to. And so then you got a live view, or it's not live, but it looks like a live view of the actual property itself. And so if you want to see more detail, is this a 2-story? Am I cleaning gutters? Where are the beds on the front of the house? Because you may not be able to see exactly where they're located whenever you're doing like a top down satellite view. So you do that street view and you're going to see so much more detail. Do we have fences? Do we have gates? That kind of thing. You're asking questions, that you may not be able to see clearly from a satellite view. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize you can do, is be able to get that more bird's eye view of that particular property. And then of course you got routing. I'm passionate about it because I love the strategic side of how that you can take all of this information, all this data, and be able to really strategize with it and do some pretty cool stuff. for your business.
Okay, so advanced estimates. The agenda promises attendees can pump out estimates in 5 minutes or less. Walk me through how that's actually possible. Andrew?
Yeah. I love this question. It reminds me of a quote that like really advanced technologies feel like magic. And someone going into this blind is going to be like, there's no way. But there really is a way. So we'll walk you through how to set up estimates, not just the documents and how they look to the customers, but on our side as well, like on the Service Autopilot side, we talked a couple of times about rate matrices, which is just a way for the system to tell you what the rate should be for that customer based on, say, some property measurement. We'll talk about setting up the estimate descriptions. We'll talk about setting up what are called estimate templates, which is another thing that people get confused with the documents. But a template is a way of building estimates fast. So if you have, say, like your weekly maintenance service and you've got like a fertilization program and a bed maintenance program and all of these things that you commonly quote together, you can make a template for that. So instead of having to click add item on your estimate 10 times, you just add from a template, pulls all that stuff in, pulls all your descriptions in, it does the rate matrix calculation. And if there's nothing weird about the property, like they have a small gate or something, then that's ready to go. And it took maybe 30 seconds. It'll also select the document for you. Now, oftentimes, of course, because properties are weird, sometimes there are things where, hey, we got to make an adjustment. No big deal. We actually have a column for that for the adjust rate. And we can just say, hey, this guy's got a small gate. I'm going to up his rate by 10% or something like that. And then it'll just do the math for you. When you get it set up, it really becomes autopilot when you're making the estimates.
It feels like this, especially, and we just talked about smart maps prior to this. If you could think about features that could definitely like help level up a business, like your clients' businesses and grow them. Advanced estimates, smart maps. I feel like we're getting kind of the tools in the toolbox of you got to be using these things because you're just literally leaving money on the table if you're not. And these are not difficult things. They're just maybe not thought about in the particular way that they need to be thought about. And they're not hard. They're not big investments. I mean, if you can pump out an estimate like that in 30 seconds, like that's worth your time, right? Like, especially if you're increasing someone's price by like 10%, if you can, like that stuff adds up fast. So it's huge.
It does. Did you know too, and just a little side note, I'll actually look the statistic up. The faster that you can actually get an estimate out, there's a 78% chance that you'll be able to win that estimate over all of your other competitors. So if you can get it out within 3 to 5 minutes, there's a 78% chance. That's a stat that's actually, you can look it up. You can win. You have that big of a chance to win over your competitors just by getting it out fast.
It's incredible. So using basically the idea of using advanced estimates and being able to get that out, you can probably increase your potential of closing sales by like 75% just by using something that would take you 30 seconds to pump out. So yeah. All right, that closes out day one. So let's head on to day two and talk about what that's going to be like. We've already talked about a handful of features that are going to be incredibly useful for the different people we've talked about a handful of features that are incredibly useful for leveling up businesses and getting them on the right track to basically grow. So we'll start off here. It looks like the first thing you guys start with is advanced scheduling. All right. So I see on the agenda here, never miss a job again. So how does the advanced scheduling session deliver on that? Scott, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So as long as you put your jobs in the system, it's going to go somewhere. Well, I'll tell you where it goes. So there's different types of jobs. Some jobs go directly to the waiting list. Some jobs go directly to the dispatch board. Regardless, as long as you are getting them in the system and then you dispatch them, whether it's from dispatching off of the waiting list over to the dispatch board or directly from the dispatch board, you're not going to miss it. I mean, to dispatch, you've got to assign it. But at the same time, if it's assigned to someone, it's been dispatched, the guys in the field are going to get it. Not only are you not going to miss the job, it's going to get done unless you have some bad employees. So there's really no way to miss it as long as you're staying on top of your schedule. The only way you would miss it is if you're in Hawaii and you decide not to look at your dispatch board and do anything with it. That's the only way you'd miss it, or wherever. So yeah, so that's it's impossible to miss if you're staying, if you're paying attention to your dispatch board. In other words, where this whole claim comes from. A lot of companies that don't have a CRM or they don't have a system like Service Autopilot, they'll write down a job that they hear about, like maybe a phone call came in or an email. They'll put it on a sticky note. They'll put it on the back of an envelope, that they got sitting on their desk or where, whatever, or a notepad or something like that. And guess what? That ends up in the floorboard of their truck and they lose it. And so that's one of the reasons why we make that claim is because once you get it in the system, you're not going to lose it because it goes exactly where it needs to go.
So how does the waiting list, dispatch board, and calendar all work together? I know we talked about how you're not going to miss one, but how do those things work together to basically handle whatever a business might throw at it? Andrew, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So it's actually, yeah. So the way the workflow kind of goes is you'll check the waiting list first. And if you don't have any filters or anything on the waiting list, it just shows you everything, which can be really great or really annoying if you have like thousands of jobs on there that's hard to sift through. And so Scott and I say this all the time, filters are your friends. And that ties back into the never miss a job again thing is you can filter for exactly what you're looking for. Hey, I'm looking at the waiting list. I want to see all of the mulch installations that I need to get done. There's a quick filter for that. Boom, I see those services. Then you move the jobs off of the waiting list. When you dispatch them, they move off of the waiting list and then onto the dispatch board. And then your dispatch board is now your hub for, hey, these are jobs that are on this specific date. So if I'm looking at the dispatch board for Monday the 11th, these are the jobs that are scheduled for Monday the 11th. I can make sure that they're in the correct route order and whatnot. I can dispatch them. And then, like the caveat Scott gave earlier, unless you have bad employees, those jobs are going to get done. They're on there. They're easy to find. And we do in this section talk a little bit as well about like how to find jobs, like just quick ways to find jobs, like little pro tips here and there. Because there's sometimes where you might be looking for a job for a specific person. You're like, I know we put that in there, but I can't find it. And there's ways to look for it on the client's account that really streamline that process. And it's easier than sifting through the whole waiting list. And then the calendar is really kind of just a different view of the dispatch board. So a lot of times, especially in like the commercial or residential cleaning industry, it's not just we do the jobs when we do them in whatever order is best. They have set appointment times because you're going into somebody's home. And so the calendar is just a different view that is going to show you the time slots of those jobs. So you can organize, hey, yeah, we've got a hole here. We could put somebody on like a biweekly cleaning in that time slot is really what the calendar is for. It's just a different view of the same information.
So it sounds like the advanced scheduling really helps make the most of like optimizing your scheduling, assuming that it didn't get stuck in like a floorboard or something like that, like written on the back of a piece of paper and then thrown out. But if you did get it into the system, what you're going to help them do with their best practices, you're basically helping them at that point. The next step is optimizing their workflows and trying to make sure that they're treating it as best as they can. Okay, so we see how all these things work together, which is fantastic. So we're optimizing their workflows. What's closeout day? And why is getting it right such a big deal for the rest of the business? Scott?
So closeout day is where all of your job data comes together, usually at the end of the day. Similar, which is, thus the name closeout day. Most people, I'll just make, there's a little caveat here. I just want to make this statement out loud because most people get worried. They're like, hey, you know what? If I'm doing a closeout day, and I'll explain what that process looks like here in a minute, but if I'm doing a closeout day, how am I supposed to do that when my guys are still out in the field and I'm actually going home because it's the middle of the summer, it's still daylight. They're working till 8:00 at night. I'm going to leave at 5. How do I do a closeout day? Because the jobs aren't even done yet. And so the answer to that is don't worry about that part of it. Just get it done as soon as you possibly can after the day is done. Usually what most people do is they'll come in early the next morning and they'll do a closeout day for the previous day. That's usually how it typically works from a workflow standpoint. All right. So now let's talk about what a closeout day is really, and then why it's so important. So a closeout day is where you're essentially just doing an audit of your day-to-day operations from the dispatch board. A closeout day is on the dispatch board. It's just a different view of the dispatch board where you're able to see a lot more data across the dispatch board. So that way you can essentially audit and make sure everything got done. So the first thing you're going to do on a closeout day is literally look at the little icons on the left-hand side of the screen, and they'll tell you just at a simple glance, really fast, what jobs got completed, what jobs were invoiced, what jobs got skipped, what jobs didn't get done at all, that kind of thing. And so essentially you're just troubleshooting and saying, hey, if these didn't get done, number one, why didn't they get done? Number two, what am I going to do with them? Well, do I need to move them to a different day because they didn't get done? So you're kind of asking yourself these kind of questions, and then you're finding out how you're going to handle it. The main purpose is really just so things don't fall through the cracks. If something did get done, guess what? You don't get paid because there's not going to be an invoice. So, so that's a kind of a big deal. So that's one of the reasons why you want to do this. The other reasons are when you're doing a closeout day, you're checking times and you're checking revenue and you're checking comparisons of budgeted versus actual. You can see all of that on the closeout day screen. And you're looking at the accuracy of time check, time tracking and revenue. And like if I'm doing hourly work, I want to make sure that my time is correct, the number of guys on a crew is correct, because those are multipliers to give me what an hourly amount will be on an invoice. So the primary things and the primary reason why you want to make sure all of this is correct and you're doing a closeout day every day is for time tracking, or first make sure your jobs got completed. Time tracking feeds into job costing. The job cost report actually pulls the majority of the data that it gets into the report from the closeout day screen. If your closeout day is not correct, then your job costing is not going to be correct. If your closeout day is not correct, especially the revenue side of it, your invoicing is not going to be correct. If you do any kind of payroll reporting out of Service Autopilot and your time tracking is off, then your payroll is not going to be correct. So that's why I say the closeout day screen is one of the most important screens in the whole system. It is the transition between the scheduling operations of your business and the invoicing operation of your business. And also it's that screen, which I already said, feeds into potentially payroll if you use it in Service Autopilot, and definitely into job costing as well.
I mean, to me, that it sounds like, I know it's called closeout day, but to me, it sounds like that's the way you finish your day. Like, regardless, like at the end of the day, you want to do a closeout day because that way you can make sure, like, it's your final step in your day-to-day operations of this whole idea of optimizing and making sure you're not missing anything. You're doing the best you can. So it really is just like a best practice habit to get into.
It is. Yeah. Otherwise your data is just not going to be right. And then there's going to be all kinds of issues and problems if you're not staying on top of it.
Okay. So let's talk about the mobile app. So I'll hit you with two questions first. So the first thing is, when we talk about mobile, I've heard the terms team app and I heard legacy app. Do we do both of those at the virtual training? Is it one or the other? Which one is that?
So we really do kind of talk about both. And it sort of depends on who's present, because the two apps currently, they have different features. And so there are specific caveats for why someone might use one over the other. And that is kind of a changing thing. Of course, our product team is working very hard to update the team app and adding features, but there are specific things where if a customer or if one of our members says, hey, I want my guys to be able to see jobs that are on future dates. I want them to be able to see their schedule for tomorrow. Right now, they would be limited to using the legacy app. The team app doesn't currently have that feature. Or vice versa. If they're like, I don't want them to see that, using the team app kind of blocks them from doing that. So yeah, we do talk about both, especially also when it comes to forms, just to kind of harken back to that, because we talk about forms that the crews fill out. The type of form you make depends on which app they're using. So we do talk about it even early on when we're talking about forms. We'll just mention it. Hey, we have two apps. If you use the legacy app, you'll use the classic forms. If you're using the team app, you'll use the V3 or the new SA form.
So at least, yes, the answer is we'll talk about any mobile app. And also on top of that, you basically help determine with the members there on site what they need to be talking about, what they should be looking at. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. What's one thing crews in the field can do with a mobile app that most owners don't realize they can do?
Yeah. So there's one quick thing is really just the time tracking, that it's just there. Like the time tracking from the mobile app, it just goes on to the closeout day. So that's one less step that your operations manager, scheduler has to do when they're doing the closeout day process. They don't have to put in those times. They might verify that it seems accurate, that they didn't like clock in and clock out within like 30 seconds of each other, but it's verification and not just manual data entry.
Scott, what about you? Do you have one? Do you have a feature that most owners don't really realize the mobile can do?
Yeah, so there's what's called a load list, and so if you're doing anything that concerns or involves any kind of a product at all or materials, if you add those to your jobs in the main system, when your people in the field pull those up on the team app, now this is on the team app, in the upper left hand corner, there's a little menu that they can go into, and there's a load list in there, and they just click on that, and it'll literally show every single product that your people need to load up, like say first thing in the morning before they head out, to their first property. And so it's kind of convenient and pretty nice because most people don't realize that you can do that. And that's just your list. Here's everything we got to load. Here's the quantities of each one of those and get them on the truck and go.
Nice. I also see on the agenda you guys have bulk clock in and GPS tracking. How do these features change the day to day for a field service business?
Yeah. So bulk clocking is really there for, like, if you've got 3 houses that are all right next to each other, what a lot of crews will do is they'll just mow across all 3 front yards. Like, for example, at my house, the same company services me and my neighbor. And so they just mow across our front yards. And so rather than having to halfway through switch which job they're clocked into, they just clock into both and then they clock out of both when they're done. And it'll split the time between those jobs. Saves them a bunch of time. And then it also makes the data entry easier. And then for GPS tracking, this is really just like verifying where the crew was at what time. So if they said, hey, yeah, we started this job at 11 o'clock, you could look on the map and see, no, you were at some gas station at 11 o'clock. And you could kind of audit them that way, or even just see like, hey, they took a weird route to this place. They seemed to get lost, or they hung out again at that gas station for 30 minutes when they should have been working. You can really kind of manage your teams that way just by seeing where they were. You just see it as breadcrumbs on a map.
So the next part is timesheets and job costing setup. Earlier, we did talk about this. Actually, earlier, Scott Howard, you kind of mentioned that you have a soft spot for job costing. So we'll probably start with you on this one. So I've seen in my own experience with members that job costing is one of those areas where a lot of owners think that they know their numbers, but then they find out that they don't. What does this session help them see clearly for the first time?
So it helps them see a comparison of what their budgeted time is versus their actual time. That's one of the big that's a kind of an aha moment is they think that a particular property might take, let's just say 30 minutes to do maybe a maintenance job of some kind. But in reality, especially if it's maintenance where they're doing over and over and over again, they might see a pattern where it's taking an extra amount of time, maybe an extra 15 minutes versus that 30 minutes that's actually taking 45 minutes. When you start seeing those kind of trends, you recognize that early enough on to where you would have maybe a conversation with your person in the field that says, hey, why is this taking so much longer? It didn't used to take this long. And then maybe in that case, so what that does is that spurs that kind of a conversation or those kind of questions so that you can catch issues like that early on. It might be that the crew has been negligent at that property, but probably not. If it was 15 minutes consistently every time they go out there where it didn't used to be that, it might be that Mrs. Smith has grandkids and she put a brand new jungle gym play set in her backyard. And now they're having to trim around it and mow around it or whatever, they're having to do. And she put in a sandbox and she put in a trampoline, and maybe a little swimming pool or whatever, so now it's taking an extra 15 minutes because they're having to go around all this stuff and trim around all of it, all this extra thing. But if you don't notice that kind of stuff, then, and see these trends over time, which is why one of the reasons why we want to do job costing is you won't know that, hey, I need to probably increase Mrs. Smith's price because it's taking our guys a lot longer because she put all these extra obstacles in the way. So that kind of stuff, that's where the job costing can show that. But it can also show things like maybe you're not charging enough, and it'll actually reveal that because one of the things it'll show is like your cost versus revenue. And there's a column that's called your dollars per man hour, your actual dollars per man hour. So maybe you have a goal or maybe you have a target dollars per man hour rate that you want to be able to achieve. And so maybe your target rate is $80 a man hour. Maybe that's what you need to be making on certain types of jobs. And so there's actually a target that shows that for certain services, and it'll show that, hey, I need to be making this. But then there's another column right next to that's your over under column. and it'll let you know. It's like, hey, here's my target, but I was over maybe by $10 on this job, but I was under maybe by $15 on this job. And you keep watching that over time, say over the course of a month, especially if it's like a weekly maintenance kind of a job. And you're seeing these trends. It's like I am consistently under every time we go to this property by this amount of money. Well, if I added that all up for the whole season, maybe I'm going to be under by $500 at the end of the season, if you keep adding that up. And being able to recognize that and see those trends and be able to see those kind of either consistencies or inconsistencies, it really, really helps open the eyes, especially of business owners or managers within a business, like operations managers and that kind of thing. Those kind of people who actually watch those reports, it really can open your eyes to be able to see how that you can improve efficiency, maybe even increase prices, troubleshoot issues of maybe accountability issues with employees, or just being able to understand better how you're doing with your revenue, because you can also aggregate columns in there, so you can get sums and averages on those different columns. So it just really makes it a very strategic way to see how to fix problems, or maybe even have some affirmation that you're doing okay in certain areas as well. So yeah, it's job costing. I'm very passionate about it because it can really help a company see how they're doing. Actually, let me add this little illustration. If you're not job costing, it's like in the wintertime, I'm in Texas, so we don't have a big winter. But for those states who do have winters, if you've ever been driving along in the wintertime and you had a lot of snow and ice and salt and stuff all over the road, you know how that windshield gets. And you hit your windshield wipers and it cleans it off maybe the first couple of times. But after you've driven like that for a week or two, it just gets to where the windshield wiper won't even get that stuff off of your windshield anymore. So you got to go clean it or get some alcohol or something to get that sludge off of there. Well, that's kind of the way it is if you're not job costing. You can see how your business or where your business is going. You can kind of see the ditches on both sides, but you can't see clearly where you're going. And as that relates to job costing, you can't see clearly your financial picture and how you're really doing and what direction you're really traveling with your company. But once you start doing job costing, it's like that windshield is clean all the time. You know exactly where you're going. You know exactly how you're doing, and you know strategically how you can actually improve on efficiency, improve on productivity, and improve on profitability. You know where you could do increases in prices. You know how to do all of this, and keep your guys accountable in the field. It just helps in so many different ways. It helps you see clearly how you're running your business.
Okay, so let's segue into strategic reporting, because I think we've been talking about these like high level details on like the business and being able to dive in deeper. And that's really what it seems like the virtual training does, is that it helps people uncover these things. So with strategic reporting, I guess, what kind of stuff will attendees learn that goes like beyond the standard built-in reports? Andrew?
Yeah. So we will show you how to make what we call a custom analysis, which is basically making a report yourself. So if there's something that one of our pre-built reports, either like you're not seeing it on there for whatever reason, you're not finding what you're looking for, or it's not something that one of our pre-built reports shows for whatever reason, we'll show you how to build that. And then in terms of strategy of reporting, so Scott talked a lot about like strategy around job costing. And what we can do at this point is kind of zoom out a little bit and look at, say, like a revenue by service sort of thing, which is a report that we have in the system where you can report on your revenue by service. And that's wonderful. It's a good report. But we can kind of also talk about what some companies they'll do this with like class reporting or things like that. Classes are a QuickBooks feature, but so then they'll have different classifications of services like, hey, here's our irrigation services, here's our maintenance services, here's our landscaping services. And then doing like revenue for those specific parts of the business. So you can see, hey, okay, this is where this part of the business is so far, where this part of the business is so far. And then doing all kinds of comparisons, year over year growth and those sorts of things. So we're really getting into like the very high level, like business, like, all right, here's the reports on our business health that we need. We will talk about the pre-built reports too, of course, some of the ones that are the most helpful. But what we really focus on is, hey, here's how to build a couple of different types of custom analyses so you can kind of, the gears start turning and you can get ideas of, this is how I would build something for myself in that area.
If a business owner only looks at one or two reports in Service Autopilot, what would you tell them to start with?
Job costing first and foremost. That's going to be the most important one. I personally think class reporting, if you do it, you do have to turn some things on, but if you do class reporting, that's really only applicable though if you have different segments of your business or different divisions in your business. The cool thing about class reporting, you don't really even have to sync with QuickBooks to do it, even though it's like it was kind of invented by QuickBooks, I think, a long time ago. And even the accounting definition of it comes from QuickBooks. It's a segment of your business or a division of your business. But at the same time, you can turn classes on in Service Autopilot and do class reporting in most cases. So, but yeah, that's probably another one, especially if I would say that's more of a full service business that has multiple divisions. That would be a strategy that you could use for that. But then I honestly love what Andrew just said as well with like doing revenue by service. I think that's great too, because then you can say, hey, you know what? I might have this gateway service, which in the lawn care industry, that would be mowing. And I might be making a margin of 2% on mowing. But you know what? That gets my foot in the door on all these properties. And once I've got my foot in the door, now I can start looking at my margins on these other services. So that's your revenue by service and profit margin by service, being able to see what that is and knowing and be able to track it and see, well, how much profit margin am I making with this particular service or that particular service? And then again, that helps you plan for the future. Where do I want to focus my marketing efforts? Well, my highest profit margin services is really what I'm going to try to sell more of because that's where I'm making the most money, so that's a strategy there, by looking at those kind of reports.
That's an incredible way to look at it, especially for the services, finding out what works, what doesn't work, which is probably incredibly helpful for businesses that are trying to grow and they're just wasting a lot of time on services that aren't giving them a lot of ROI. So, yeah, I would also agree with those. Okay, let's move into automations, which is probably my favorite thing Service Autopilot does. So we'll start with the marketplace has free pre-built automations ready to go. Why do you think more members haven't tapped into them yet? And what changes after this session?
So I think one of the major reasons that people haven't tapped into those pre-built automations is simply that they don't know where to find them. That oftentimes is the feedback we get when we show them, hey, here's how to find them, is they're like, oh, that was easy. We have a Help Center article that it's called Marketplace Automations, and it has a link to every single automation that we've built and we've tested, and you can download it. You might tweak some things if you like about, with the wording of emails or things like that. And then you just turn it on and it works. And then as far as what changes, like seeing how easy it actually is, because we'll kind of walk you through it, how easy it is to take one of those automations, make any changes you might need to make, and then turn it on. And then you have a automation that's following up on your past due invoices for you. It is an instant revenue generator because suddenly you have people that owe you money and suddenly they're getting all these reminders and they start paying you back. Scott has a story that he tells, and I'm going to steal it for this, but of somebody who they downloaded that particular automation, they turned it on, and the next day someone paid them a $17,000 past due invoice that they just forgot to follow up on. And automations paid for itself with that one automation that he just downloaded and turned on.
So I was going to ask you, what's an example of an automation that pays for itself almost immediately? Andrew, what's the name of that automation?
It is called cash flow, and then in parentheses, invoice past due.
And by doing that, you will get a $17,000 invoice paid like overnight.
That'd be really cool. Yeah. I mean, this guy did. So
everybody gets that when you download it. Yeah. That's the instant reward.
Service Autopilot does not condone that you will get a $17,000 invoice immediately. Scott Howard does not speak for the company, but you should download that automation and start using it today. How customizable are these automations once a business pulls them in from the marketplace?
100%. You can change them as much as you want. So sometimes there's one that's called estimate follow-up, and people will download that one. And then the cadence for how it follows up, they might find it a little too aggressive or something like, oh, I don't want to bug them that much. I want to maybe tone it down a little bit. You can fully just change it and make it whatever you want it to be. You can kind of use it as a starting point and then you just modify it to fit your needs. But yeah, nothing there is set in stone. You can make it yours 100%.
Scott, do you have one?
I was just going to just kind of reiterate what Andrew was saying is that maybe the automation is not aggressive enough and you want to just pepper someone who was really interested in maybe an estimate that you just sent out just by conversation, and that that it's like a hot lead and you know that they're really interested, but they're just not getting back with you. So you could actually make that automation even more aggressive if you wanted to. You could say, hey, we're going to wait 1 day and then we're going to send out an email. And then if they don't answer by the morning, we're going to send out a text message in the evening. And then we're going to wait maybe one more day. And then we're going to maybe have it create a ticket as a reminder for me to call them on that second day. And then that ticket gets created, it gets assigned to me. And then I get that ticket on that day. And it's got all of their information in there. It's got their phone number. I could even text them if I wanted to with two-way texting, or just give them a phone call, either way. And then you could just keep that process up until they actually, until you win the bid, until they actually answer and win. So, and just keep going over and over and over. Just keep doing that as many times as you want to. There's one automation that's out there. I know that one of our certified advisors, he's created one. It's called 20 days to close. And so his automation runs 20 days, and if you still haven't won it after 20 days, I think it then ends, but then I think it'll start back up again, after a certain period. And so you totally customize them as aggressive or not aggressive, or, as biggest variety of anything as you want. And so I will say this, there is a cool thing too. Let's say after you win the estimate, and this is just kind of going along that same thought process, you can actually have it automatically send what's called a form email. The form email can have the credit card information, and maybe the last or confirmation email, that particular email could be a confirmation email that says, hey, thanks for winning, or thanks for accepting our estimate. And then please click on this link to fill out your credit card form so that we can go ahead and get your services scheduled. And so that could actually be an automated thing where they're actually filling out that credit card form right there as soon as you win that estimate. And you don't even have to talk to them. They basically fill it out. You got a card on file. And now you just go ahead and schedule the work and get out there and get to work, get it done, and get paid.
The last section that we have here is your training your way, which is new. So let's talk a little bit about that. Brand new to the virtual training, closes out each day. What inspired you guys for adding that to the agenda?
So when we do the live regional trainings in person, we have something similar to this where we will break out, we'll split into a couple groups, and it just gives like a more intimate setting for like a interaction with myself or Scott. And so we figured out how to do breakout rooms in the Zoom session. And so what we do, instead of just breaking into two groups, is we'll book like a 30-minute time slot and with either Scott or myself. And then that's just your time to pepper us with your questions that maybe we didn't answer. And so we'll go into that breakout room. It'll just be, say, me and then people from your company. And then that's just your time. And it's the best way that we could replicate what we do in person. So we basically just have a one-on-one time for about 30 minutes. And then we can book a follow-up one-on-one appointment if we need to. If it's, hey, yeah, you have a bunch of questions about a particular feature that we didn't go over. And, let's talk about that. Let's book a session. And sometimes that's really kind of where those conversations go. But it's really, so you get those questions, those burning questions that we didn't get to in the group session. We can answer those for you.
So if they go through the virtual training and they still have a question on the topic, you guys follow up with them with it? They can reach out to you guys about that?
Absolutely. Yes.
We'll share our calendar link with them. And then that way, if they want to book a follow-up, a virtual one-on-one later on, they could just choose a time on our calendar and go ahead and book that themselves.
It's a really good value in itself too. So what does a business look like before they attend the virtual regional training versus after they've put what they've learned into practice? Andrew?
So a lot of times what I see is people come in and they don't have a lot of confidence in the Service Autopilot software. They may be utilizing 10 or 15% of what it can do. And they're like, this is cool. I know it does more. I want to learn more about it. Sometimes they can be really struggling too with, hey, this isn't making sense to me. I don't know what the difference is between the waiting list and the dispatch board or things like that. And they can come in very frustrated. And a lot of times what they leave with is, while it does feel like drinking out of a fire hose, one thing they do leave with is more confidence that the system can do what they need it to do. And they'll feel like they have resources. And then of course they do, because we give them the reporting, they have the training to fall back on as well. And they can go back and and see those things. And they'll have learned a lot of new things about how to set things up, and things will make a lot more sense to them. So if we think like maybe 6 months down the line, they're in a much better position if they've actually implemented what they've learned, because they know not just here's how to do it, but I can see where I was 6 months ago to now. We've made a lot of changes and they've been good changes. We see what our numbers are. We aren't missing jobs. We know where to find them if, they're on the waiting list or whatever. You really do see a big pivot in this is just something I use to track things to being a much larger, like, oh, this is a tool that we're using to grow our business.
If someone applies just one thing from these 2 days, what would you want it to be? Scott?
So I would say a closeout day. I was just talking to someone on a one-on-one. They've been with us since like 2018, and they had never even heard of the term closeout day. And so when I explained it to them, it was one of those aha moments where they said, "I didn't even know this was in here. This is great. This is going to solve so many problems from a day-to-day operational, standpoint." And I said, "Yes, I highly recommend that you do it every day." And so it, it's something that will help in so many ways with employee accountability, invoicing, job costing, you name it. From a day-to-day operational standpoint, it's one of the most important things you could do. And that's what I highly recommend that you do every day.
If someone applies just one thing from these 2 days at our virtual training, what would you want it to be?
I'm going to say the advanced estimates section, because we've talked about the statistics of just getting your estimate to them first, getting it to them quickly in a matter of a few minutes, but also just being the first one to put an estimate in their hands digitally, but in their hands, is such a game changer for winning more business and growing your business.
What's the most common piece of feedback you hear from attendees after the virtual training wraps?
That the information was sometimes overwhelming and that they weren't able to get everything. But our answer to that feedback is we will schedule or allow you to schedule that follow-up call so that we can reiterate, or if you forget something, we're going to make sure that you get it, and just make sure that you're able to apply it to your business if you didn't quite get everything, because it is truly a lot of information in 2 days, just packed into 2 days. So yeah, that's the biggest feedback we get, but we have a solution for that. And we want to try to help everybody that we can to really get all of the information.
What's the most common piece of feedback you hear from attendees after the virtual training wraps?
Yeah. So aside from what Scott said, which is that it was a lot of information, commonly what I hear is that the information they got was incredibly helpful, especially I see this from people who just haven't implemented the system, whether they're brand new or they've been with us for 10 years and just never fully implemented the system. But it's like the pieces all fall into place and they have that aha moment and they're like, "Oh, okay, I see how we move to the next thing in our business journey."
For someone on the fence about registering, what would you tell them?
It's definitely worth it because you will be able to take home, even if you did just take home one thing, that one thing could be a game changer. Maybe you're not tracking your revenue, or maybe you're not closing out your day so that you can make sure all your jobs get completed and or revenue's accurate. Even if you just take that one thing and apply it, it might mean the difference between not completing jobs, not getting paid, or actually getting paid. It could also mean the difference between whether you decide to do a price increase or not do a price increase based on what you learn from the data that you've been tracking with job costing. So there's there's a little story, and this may not be something you want to put in here, but there have been people that show up to regional training and we'll just teach them little tips and tricks on how to use the browser. And they're like, that made it worth it right there. I'm so glad that we attended regional training. I now know how to open up a new tab without having to click the little plus up there. So little things like that. I mean, you're going to pick up little golden nuggets throughout this time, whether it's from us or even from some of your peers that are going to be joining you as, people that's in your industry and like-minded business owners and or managers. You're going to pick up stuff and it will definitely be worth your time and worth your money.
Thank you. So it's funny that you mentioned the browser thing, because to me, when I hear something like that, and maybe you get it too from like an educational standpoint, like a trainer thing, that is directly connected to their trust in you as a trainer. Like they're willing to be vulnerable and talk to you because they trust you, right? Like they want to learn from you and they're willing to be vulnerable, which is a huge thing. It's a big compliment, I think, a lot of times for a trainer or an educator. So I think that's a good thing. Yeah. And you never know what someone else might value. If you're just giving the information out there, you never know what someone else will value.
When you have 8 hours basically, and 16 hours total in 2 days, you have the opportunity to share a ton of information, both service autopilot related and I mean, just maybe computer related best practices. If you're not using more than one monitor on your computer, we talk about that kind of stuff. Or what's the best kind of mobile device to use out in the field, at least from our perspective, what we hear about, all the time from literally hundreds, if not thousands of users, you know, just little nuggets like that, even that may not even necessarily apply to the software, but it's just best practices that we hear just in business. A lot of those are good reasons to join these kind of sessions. Hey, thanks a lot for taking part in this video for our regional virtual training. Just remember, it's on July 16th and 17th, coming up here in just a couple of months. And don't forget, you get a special value for attending this for only $299, and that's for your entire company. You don't even have to think about, hey, how much is it per person? That's for your whole company. So if you wanted to bring 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people, however many you want to bring, it's just a flat rate of $299 for your whole company. We would love to see you there. Can't wait to see you in regional training.
Guys, well, that was Scott and Andrew, two of our veteran trainers who will be with us at our virtual regional training coming up on July 16th and 17th. Make sure to book your spots today, and we'll see you at our virtual regional training.